At 4:45 in the morning, while a 21-year-old man lay sleeping, 14 law enforcement officers stormed his apartment and fired approximately 99 rounds into it. The official story: a violent gun battle, a dangerous radical who opened fire first, a justifiable law enforcement operation. The documented truth, buried in classified FBI files for nearly a decade, was something else entirely. The floor plan of that apartment had been hand-drawn and delivered to those officers in advance by an FBI informant planted inside the organization. The young man in the bedroom had been drugged hours earlier by that same informant, so he wouldn't wake up when they came through the door. His name was Fred Hampton. He was the chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party. He was 21 years old. He was, by multiple accounts, including those of his political enemies, one of the most gifted political organizers America had produced in a generation. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation had decided he needed to be eliminated. You're about to hear how they did it, and how long they got away with it. To understand why the FBI viewed Fred Hampton as a threat worthy of assassination, you need to understand two things simultaneously: who Fred Hampton actually was, and what COINTELPRO actually did. Fred Hampton was born in 1948 in Maywood, Illinois, a working-class suburb of Chicago. He was not a street radical who stumbled into politics. He was a disciplined, strategic organizer who had led the Maywood NAACP Youth Council at 18, registering voters and running community programs with a methodical precision that made older activists take notice. By 20, he had joined the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, and within months had risen to chairman. What made Hampton unusual, what made him genuinely dangerous to certain people in power, was not his rhetoric. It was his results. Hampton organized the Panthers' Free Breakfast for Children program in Chicago, feeding thousands of kids before school in neighborhoods the city had structurally neglected for decades. He negotiated a truce between Chicago's most violent street gangs, the Blackstone Rangers, the Disciples, and was in the process of building what he called a Rainbow Coalition, a multiracial working-class political alliance that included Puerto Rican activists from the Young Patriots, the Young Lords, and even poor white Appalachian migrants from the area. A black man building a multiracial coalition of the poor across racial lines in Richard J. Daley's Chicago. That was not a story the FBI's director wanted told. J. Edgar Hoover had, by 1968, formally designated the Black Panther Party as, and this is his documented language, the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. Not foreign intelligence services, not organized crime, a community organization running a breakfast program. Hoover had a program for threats like that. It was called COINTELPRO, the FBI's counterintelligence program, had been operating since 1956, originally targeting the American Communist Party. By the late 1960s, it had metastasized into something far broader and far darker, a systematic federal program to surveil, infiltrate, discredit, and, in the Bureau's own documented internal language, neutralize black political leadership in America. The targets included Martin Luther King Jr., whom Hoover had surveilled obsessively and once sent an anonymous letter urging him to commit suicide. They included Malcolm X. They included the entire national leadership structure of the Black Panther Party. And increasingly, urgently, they included Fred Hampton. In 1968, the FBI recruited a 19-year-old named William O'Neill into the Illinois Black Panther Party as a paid informant. O'Neill rose quickly inside the organization, becoming Hampton's personal bodyguard and the chapter's director of security. O'Neill reported directly to his FBI handler, Special Agent Roy Mitchell. He was paid a regular salary, plus bonuses for actionable intelligence. He attended every meeting. He had access to every plan. And in November 1969, he did something that would seal Fred Hampton's fate. He drew a floor plan, a detailed hand-drawn map of Hampton's apartment at 2337 West Monroe Street, marking every room, every doorway, and critically, the exact location of Fred Hampton's bed. That floor plan was delivered to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, specifically to a prosecutor named Edward Hanrahan, who coordinated with the FBI to plan what would officially be described as a weapons raid on the premises. On the night of December 3, 1969, William O'Neill hosted a Panther Party dinner at Hampton's apartment. Witnesses and subsequent investigations established that O'Neill had, that evening, mixed a powerful barbiturate, secobarbital, into Hampton's drink. A toxicology report conducted after Hampton's death confirmed the presence of the drug in his system. Fred Hampton went to bed that night and, in all likelihood, never fully regained consciousness. At 4:45 a.m. on December 4th, 14 officers from the Cook County State's Attorney's Tactical Unit, armed with the FBI floor plan, breached the front and rear doors of the apartment simultaneously. What followed lasted approximately 15 minutes. Approximately 99 rounds were fired. 98 of them came from law enforcement. One, possibly, came from inside the apartment. Later forensic analysis would establish that a single shotgun discharge near the front door was the only evidence of any return fire, and even that conclusion was disputed. Fred Hampton was shot twice in the shoulder during the initial breach. He was found alive, barely, by officers who entered his bedroom. 2 officers present that morning would later testify, in subsequent civil proceedings, that they heard a voice say, "He's still alive," followed by 2 more gunshots. Fred Hampton was 21 years old. His fiancée, Deborah Johnson, 8 months pregnant with their son, was in the bed beside him. She was handcuffed and removed. She survived. Mark Clark, a Panther leader from Peoria visiting the apartment, was also killed in the raid. By sunrise, the Cook County State's Attorney was holding a press conference. Edward Hanrahan called it a shootout. He praised his officers' bravery. He displayed bullet holes in the apartment wall, claiming they showed where Panthers had fired from. An independent investigation by journalists and attorneys shortly afterward found something Hanrahan had not mentioned. Most of those bullet holes were nail heads. The cover-up was not subtle. It was not careful. It was the kind of cover-up that only works when the people being covered for control the institutions doing the investigating. Cook County convened a grand jury. It declined to indict. The Justice Department opened a civil rights investigation. It closed without charges. Hanrahan and the officers involved were indicted on charges of obstructing justice, then acquitted. For 4 years, the official story held: a gunfight, an unfortunate outcome, a legal operation. Then, in 1971, the world changed. A group of activists calling themselves the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI broke into an FBI field office in Media, Pennsylvania, and stole every document inside. What they found, and leaked to the press, was the first documentary evidence that COINTELPRO existed, that the FBI had been running systematic domestic surveillance and disruption operations against American citizens, American political organizations, and American leaders. That neutralize in FBI memoranda did not mean discredit or surveil. It meant destroy. Congressional investigations followed. In 1975, the Church Committee, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, chaired by Senator Frank Church, conducted the most comprehensive investigation of American intelligence abuses in the nation's history. What they uncovered about COINTELPRO was, in the committee's own documented language, a program that had used dangerous and degrading tactics in violation of constitutional rights and had operated outside the restraints of law. The documents released through that process and through subsequent Freedom of Information Act litigation established in black and white what had been called conspiracy theory for years, that the FBI had directly coordinated the raid on Fred Hampton's apartment, that William O'Neill's floor plan had been central to the operations planning, that the Bureau had paid a bonus to O'Neill after the raid, documented in financial records. COINTELPRO had not been a rogue operation. It had not been the work of a few bad actors. It had been institutionally sanctioned, bureaucratically administered, and deliberately concealed. It had targeted hundreds of individuals and organizations. It had destroyed careers, families, and lives. And in at least one documented case, it had killed. The Hampton case forced a reckoning, however incomplete, with a foundational question that American democracy had been avoiding. What do you do when the law enforcement apparatus of the state becomes the criminal enterprise? In 1976, 7 years after Fred Hampton's death, His family, along with the families of other raid victims, filed a federal civil lawsuit against the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the FBI. The case took 13 years to resolve. In 1983, after a trial that produced over 250,000 pages of documents, a settlement was reached. The city of Chicago, Cook County, and the federal government paid $1.85 million to the Hampton and Clark families and the other survivors. No one was ever criminally charged for the death of Fred Hampton. Not the officers who fired the shots. Not Edward Hanrahan, who orchestrated the raid and then lied publicly about it for years. Not the FBI officials who planned, funded, and oversaw the operation. Not William O'Neill, who drew the floor plan and drugged the man whose bedroom it marked. William O'Neill lived under witness protection for years. In 1990, he gave a lengthy, remarkably candid interview to the documentary series Eyes on the Prize 2, in which he discussed his role in the FBI's infiltration of the Panthers. His demeanor throughout was difficult to read, detached, somewhere between justification and something that had no clean name. Hours after the interview aired, on January 15, 1990, Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, William O'Neill walked onto the Eisenhower Expressway in Chicago and was struck and killed by a car. The Cook County Medical Examiner ruled it a suicide. Fred Hampton Jr., the son born to Deborah Johnson 3 weeks after the raid, grew up to become a community activist in Chicago. He has spent decades demanding full federal accountability for his father's killing. That accountability has never fully come. The apartment at 2337 West Monroe Street still stands. For years, residents kept a bullet hole in the wall, preserved behind plexiglass, as a monument to what happened there. And here is what the documents, taken together, tell us, not as allegation, not as interpretation, but as established, litigated, settled historical record. The United States government identified a 21-year-old community organizer as a threat. It planted a spy in his inner circle. It drugged him. It provided his precise location, in his own bed, to officers who entered his home before dawn. And when it was over, it spent years and considerable institutional resources ensuring that no one was held responsible. The word for that, in every language, under every legal framework, is assassination. Fred Hampton had a phrase he used to close his speeches. You can kill a revolutionary, but you can never kill the revolution. He said it so often that the people who feared him apparently believed the first part more than the second. Here's what I want you to take with you tonight. COINTELPRO didn't end because the government chose to stop. It ended because someone broke into a building and stole the evidence. Every piece of accountability that followed, every document, every settlement, every congressional hearing, happened because ordinary people refused to accept the official story. The question that keeps me up at night, and that I think should keep you up too, is this. If it took a burglary to expose what the government was doing in 1969, what would it take today? Leave that in the comments. And if you think there's another buried chapter of American history that power doesn't want told, At Tainted Century is listening.